first time I saw Ellen Olenska was January 1872 at the opera. It was Faust, and the whole of New York was there. The soprano was plucking the petals off the daisy and singing, he loves me not," and I was able to look across to the Mingott's box and watch May gazing ecstatically at the stage. I saw her flush a delicate pink and glance down at the bouquet of lilies of the valley I'd sent her that afternoon. The darling, how innocent she is. I think that may have been the last time I ever felt such a clean, simple pleasure.
Lend me your opera glass, Silverton.
Ah, splendid set, Newland?
Good evening, gentlemen. Silverton, Lawrence.
Well, upon my soul.
I followed the line of his glance and saw a slender woman who had just entered the Mingott's box. May's mother was offering her a seat. Her brown, curly hair was held in place by a narrow band of diamonds. She wore a rather low-cut velvet gown, and the whole of the opera house was staring at her.
Well, I didn't think the Mingotts would have tried it on.
The Countess Olenska.
Old Mrs. Mingott's granddaughter on the run from her husband.
I heard he was an awful brute.
The very worst. I knew him at Nice, a half-paralyzed, sneering fellow. When he wasn't with women, he was collecting china. Paying any price for both, I understand.
Look, and she has every right to...
Yes, but she bolted with his secretary.
I heard of her a few months later living alone in Venice. I believe her uncle went out to get her.
And now they're parading her at the opera.
To have her in the same box as young May.
I suppose it's part of the campaign to rehabilitate her. Granny Mingott's orders, no doubt.
I must go and say good evening to May and her mother. I hope you've told the Countess that we're engaged. I want you to let me announce it this evening at the ball.
But why should we bring it forward?
Because the Countess... I want to be able to stand by you against whatever nonsense people like Lawrence and Silverton...
You are so good to me.
The whole of New York must know we are family and that we'll stick together.
Why don't you tell my cousin yourself? She says she used to play with you when you were children. Go on, sit next to her.
Countess Olenska, good evening.
Newland Archer. We did used to play together, didn't we? You were a horrid boy and kissed me once behind a door. Oh, this brings it all back to me. I see everybody here in knickerbockers and pantalettes.
You have been away a very long time.
So long that I'm sure I'm dead and buried in this dear old place is heaven.
I could wish we hadn't had to tell everyone in such a crowd.
But even in a crowd, we're alone together, aren't we?
Sweet May, always. Let me kiss you.
Did you tell my cousin, Ellen?
No, I hadn't the chance after all.
Oh, you must then, for I didn't either, and I shouldn't like her to think...
Angel, of course I'll tell her. She's not here, though, is she?
No, she decided not to come at the last minute.
At the last minute?
Yes, she's awfully fond of dancing, but she suddenly made up her mind that her dress wasn't smart enough for a ball, though we thought it lovely, and so my aunt had to take her home.
May knew as well as I did the reason for her cousin's staying away, but I resolved never to let her see by the least sign that I was conscious of there being a shadow on poor Ellen Olenska's reputation. The next day, May and her mother and I went to call on her grandmother, old Catherine Mingott, the matriarch of the clan. Because of her vast weight, she could no longer go up and down stairs, so she made her drawing room and bedroom downstairs, in a style reminiscent of rather scandalous scenes in French fiction. She could do what she liked, old Mrs. Mingott. She had inherited her husband's fortune and traveled the world, hobnobbing with dukes and ambassadors, and marrying 2 of her daughters into foreign aristocracy. Oh, she didn't care one fig for the niceties. She had even built her house out in an unfashionable wilderness near Central Park.
A pity my poor Ellen isn't here to congratulate you.
Never mind, Mother. Now, May, show her your engagement ring.
Here it is, Granny.
It's the newest setting. Of course, it shows the stone beautifully, but it looks a little bare to old-fashioned eyes.
Old-fashioned eyes, Augusta. I hope you don't mean mine. I like all the novelties. Very handsome. But it's the hand that sets off the ring, isn't it, Mr. Archer?
Indeed.
Mine was modeled in Rome by the great Ferrugiani. You should have May's done. No doubt he'll have it done, my child. Her hand is large. It's these modern sports that spread the joints, but the skin is white. And when's the wedding to be?
Oh.
As soon as it ever can. If only you'll back me up, Mrs. Mingott.
We must give them time to get to know each other a little better, Mama.
Fiddlesticks! Everybody in New York has always known everybody. Let the young man have his way, my dear. Don't wait till the bubble's off the wine. Marry them before Lent. I may catch pneumonia any winter now, and I want to give the wedding breakfast.
Oh, Granny, thank
Mother,
you.
how can you say such a
That's
thing?
exceedingly
Honestly.
handsome of you, madam. Countess Olenska. Beaufort.
Ellen, how lovely to see you.
Beaufort, this is a rare favor.
Thanks, I wish it might happen oftener. I'm generally so tied down at the bank, but I met the Countess Ellen in Madison Square, and she was good enough to let me walk home with her.
I hope the house will be gayer now that Ellen's here. Sit down,
Countess,
Beaufort. Push up.
Of course you know already about our engagement. May scolded me for not giving you the news last night at the opera.
Yes, I'm so glad. But one doesn't tell such things first in a crowd. Goodbye, Newland. Come and see me someday.
Look, it's snowing. Isn't Grandma Mingott wonderful?
I could wish she might keep Ellen a little in check.
Mama!
She seemed in excellent spirits, Mrs. Welland.
Oh, she likes you, Newland. You've always been one of her favorites.
Well, the next evening Sillerton came to dine. Mother always invited him when she wanted to test which way the wind was blowing.
The Beauforts asked that Struthers woman to their ball, Sillerton.
Certain nuances escape Beaufort, my dear Adeline.
Oh, Beaufort is a vulgar man.
But his house is so beautiful, Mamma.
Money, Janie. Nothing but money.
One might expect a banker to have money.
One might expect an Englishman who is married into New York society to have a better sense of propriety.
And the Countess Olenska, was she at the ball?
Ah, yes. Newland's new cousin.
No, Janie, she was not at the ball.
Perhaps the Beauforts don't know her.
Oh, Mrs. Beaufort may not, but Beaufort certainly does, for she was seen walking up Fifth Avenue with him this afternoon by the whole of New York.
Mercy!
I wonder what she was wearing. At the opera, I know she had on dark blue velvet, gathered below the bust, like a nightgown.
Janie! It was, at any rate, in better taste not to go to the ball.
I don't think it was a question of taste with her, Mother. May said she decided that the dress in question wasn't smart enough.
Oh, poor Ellen. We must always bear in mind what an eccentric upbringing Medora gave her after her dear parents died. What can you expect of a girl who was allowed to wear black satin at her coming-out ball?
Oh, don't I remember her in it, poor girl.
It's odd that she should have kept such an ugly name as Ellen. I should have changed it to Elaine.
Why Elaine?
I don't know. It sounds more Polish.
It sounds more conspicuous, and that can hardly be what she wishes.
Why not? Why shouldn't she be conspicuous if she chooses? She had the bad luck to make a wretched marriage, but I don't see that's a reason for hiding her head as if she were the culprit.
That, I suppose, is the line the Mingotts mean to take.
I heard she means to get a divorce.
I hope she will.
Janie, Newland, that's enough.
Fine library, Newland.
Yes, I received regular parcels from my bookseller in London. A cigar, sir?
Oh, thank you. Do you know, your unhappy countess was living with her husband's secretary for a while, after he helped her to get away. Somebody met them at Lausanne together.
Living together? Well, why not? Who had the right to make her life over if she hadn't? I'm sick of the hypocrisy that would bury alive a woman of her age if her husband prefers to live with harlots. Women ought to be free. As free as we are. I sat up a long while after Sillerton left, wondering what on earth had driven me to such a defense of Ellen Olenska. No decent woman would ever claim that kind of freedom. I looked at the photo of May I kept on the table, her frank forehead, serious eyes, and smiling, innocent mouth. And I realized she was frank and innocent because she knew nothing. Her innocence was the careful creation of a great conspiracy of mothers and grandmothers forming what I, as a man, was supposed to want, so that I could have the pleasure of smashing it like an image made of snow. Oh, how could we ever know each other? Since I, as a decent fellow, had a duty to conceal my past from her, my affair with poor Mrs. Rushworth, and she, as a marriageable girl, had a duty to have no past to conceal. At the very moment of my betrothal, when I should have been full of cloudless hopes, I was pitched into a coil of dark and cynical speculation. And 2 days later, Ellen Olenska was the cause of even more upheaval.
Newland, I hardly know how to tell you. The most appalling snub. You know my brother Lovell is throwing a dinner for Ellen.
Indeed.
Inviting the cream of New York, all the inner circle. Well, they have all turned him down.
Everyone, Mrs. Welland?
Without so much as the breath of an excuse.
I can guess who's behind this. That wretch Lawrence Lefferts.
Well, the only people who've accepted are the Beauforts. Newland, do you think it's possible your dear mother might be able to have a word with your cousins, the van der Luydens?
Henry and Louisa van der Luyden were our aristocracy, direct descendants of the first Dutch governor of Manhattan, and related by pre-revolutionary marriages to French and British peers of the realm. They were grand enough to be above our social sphere, in a kind of super-terrestrial twilight. They were our final arbiters on all matters of rank and etiquette.
So, my dear Henry, May's mother and I both felt that, especially in view of Newland's engagement, you and Louisa ought to know.
Newland, you really think this snub is due to some intentional interference of Lawrence Leffert?
I'm certain of it, sir. Lawrence has been having a rather obvious affair with the postmaster's wife in their village, and whenever poor Gertrude Lefferts begins to suspect anything, he gets up a fuss of this kind to show how awfully moral he is. He's using Madame Olenska as a lightning rod. I've seen him try the same thing before.
Imagine Lawrence Lefferts pronouncing on anyone's social position, Henry.
It is the principle that I dislike. As long as a member of a well-known family is backed up by that family, it should be considered final.
That is exactly my point. If we don't stand together, there'll be no such thing as society left.
Louisa's relative, the Duke of St. Austri, arrives next week from London. We are inviting a few friends to meet him here. Only a little dinner with a reception afterwards. I am sure Louisa will be as glad as I am if Countess Olenska will let us include her among our guests.
The following week, I watched Ellen Olenska make her entrance into the van der Luydens' drawing room. She arrived rather late, one hand still ungloved, fastening a bracelet about her wrist. People said she had lost her looks, but they were wrong. She was pale, and maybe a little older looking than her 30 years, but she moved with the mysterious authority of beauty. She was quiet in her movement and in the tones of her low-pitched voice, not showy in the New York fashion, but she drew the admiring glance of every man in the room, and unlike the other ladies, she moved freely among us, selecting whom she would talk with.
May I sit beside you, Newland? I've had quite enough of the Duke of St. Austri.
Countess, you knew the Duke before?
Oh, yes, we used to see him every winter at Nice. He's very fond of gambling. He used to come to the house a great deal. I think he's the dullest man I have ever met.
Really?
May is a darling. I've seen no young girl in New York so handsome and so intelligent. Are you very much in love with her?
As much as a man can be.
How delightful. And you found each other for yourselves. It was not in the least arranged for you?
Of course not.
You must forgive me. Everything here is good. That was bad where I've come from.
I'm so sorry. But you are among friends here, you know.
Yes, I know. I want to become a complete American again, like the Mingotts and the Wellens and all the other good people here tonight. Oh, here's May. You'll want to hurry away to her.
Oh, I have so many rivals, you see. She's already surrounded.
Then stay with me a little longer.
Yes. Let me stay.
Countess Olenska.
Ellen.
We are neglecting you. May I show you the family portraits?
And Mr. van der Luyden, you are too kind. Tomorrow then, after 5, Newland, I shall expect you.
Tomorrow.
It was good of you, Newland, to devote yourself so unselfishly to Countess Olenska. Your cousin Henry told me that he really must rescue you.
Ah, yes.
He says the Duke thinks May is the handsomest girl in the room.
As Mrs. Welland spoke, I was amused to see Lawrence lead his wife up to be introduced to the Countess, followed by a number of other recalcitrant couples who had previously declined to meet her. I was at Countess Olenska's house for 5:30 the next day. It was the other end of West 23rd Street. Her neighbors were dressmakers, bird stuffers, riders, and there was a sense of dilapidation about the whole place. But when her Italian maid let me in, I saw that she had furnished it with charm. There were slender tables of dark wood, a delicate Greek bronze on the chimney-piece, Italian pictures.
Ah, Newland. Well, how do you like my funny little house? To me, it's like heaven.
You've arranged it delightfully.
Well, I suppose what I like is the blessedness of its being here, in my own country, and of being alone in it.
You like so much to be alone?
Yes, so long as my friends keep me from feeling lonely. Nastasia will bring the tea presently. Well, this is the hour I like best, don't you?
I was afraid you'd forgotten the hour. Beaufort must have been very engrossing.
Why, have you waited long? Mr. Beaufort took me to see a number of houses, since my relatives disapprove of this one.
This street is not fashionable.
Fashion. But I suppose I've lived too independently, at any rate. I want to do what you all do. I want to feel cared for and safe.
And that's what your friends want you to feel.
Being here is like being taken on holiday, when one has been a good little girl and done all one's lessons.
Last night, New York laid itself out for you.
How kind the van der Luydens are. Everyone seems to have such esteem for them.
The van der Luydens are the most powerful influence in New York society. Unfortunately, owing to her health, they receive very seldom.
Isn't that perhaps the reason?
The reason?
For the great influence, that they make themselves so rare. Grazie, Nastasia. You'll explain these things to me?
Oh, it's you who are opening my eyes to things I've looked at so long that I've ceased to see them.
Then we can help each other. You must tell me just what to do.
There are plenty of people to tell you what to do.
My aunts, my dear old granny, they're all vexed with me for setting up for myself, but I had to be free.
I understand how you feel. Still, your family can advise you. Show you the way.
Is New York such a labyrinth? I thought it so straight up and down, like Fifth Avenue, and with all the cross streets numbered. If you knew how I like it for that. The straight up and downness and the big honest labels on everything.
Everything may be labeled, but everybody is not.
Oh, there are only two people here who make me feel as if they understood what I mean and could explain things to me. You and Mr. Beaufort.
Well, don't let go of your relatives' hands. Your Granny Mingott, Mrs. Welland, they want to help you.
Oh, I know. I know. But on condition they don't hear anything unpleasant. Aunt Welland put it in those very words when I tried. Does no one want to know the truth here, Newland? The real loneliness is living among all these kind people who only ask one to pretend.
Madame Olenska. Oh, don't, Ellen. Ellen, don't cry.
Does no one cry here either? I suppose there's no need to. In heaven.
Next day, I persuaded May to escape from church with her parents and come for a walk in the park instead. It was a brilliant, blue, frosty day, and May looked radiant.
It's so delicious, waking every morning to smell lilies of the valley in one's room.
Yesterday they came late. I hadn't time in the morning.
Oh, but your remembering each day to send them makes me love them so much more than if you'd given a standing order. And they came every morning on the minute, like one's music teacher. As I know Gertrude Lefferts did when she and Lawrence were engaged.
Ah, they would. When I sent your lilies yesterday, I saw some fiery yellow roses and packed them off to the Countess Olenska. Was that right?
Well, how dear of you. It's odd she didn't mention it. She lunched with us today. She spoke of Mr. Beaufort's having sent her wonderful orchids and Cousin Henry a whole hamper of carnations from Skuytercliff.
Oh, well, no wonder mine were overshadowed by Beaufort's.
Well, look at them skating, Newland. That girl in red.
Then I remembered that I had put no card with the yellow roses. How stupid to have mentioned them. I had no desire for my visit to Ellen to be a mystery, but it seemed best to change the topic. I'm sorry your mother still insists on a long engagement.
Aren't we very well off as we are?
We might be much better off. We might be all together. We might travel this spring.
That would be lovely, but Mother wouldn't understand us wanting to be so different.
Different? We're all as like each other as those dolls cut out of the same folded paper. We're like patterns stenciled on a wall. Can't you and I strike out for ourselves, May?
Mercy, shall we elope?
Oh, if you would.
You do love me, Newland. I'm so happy.
But then why not be happier?
We can't behave like people in novels, though, can we?
Why not? Why not? Why not?
I'm not clever enough to argue with you, but that kind of thing is rather vulgar, isn't it?
Are you so much afraid of being vulgar?
Well, of course I should hate it. So would you. Did I tell you I showed Ellen my ring? She thinks it the most beautiful setting she ever saw. I do love you, Newland, for being so artistic.
It was a couple of weeks after this that old Mr. Letterblair, the head of the law firm where I was a junior partner, summoned me to his office.
My dear Archer, I've sent for you to go into a little matter. A matter which, for the moment, I prefer not to mention to the other partners for family reasons.
Family?
The Mingott family. The older Mrs. Mingott sent for me yesterday. Her granddaughter, the Countess Olenska, wishes to sue her husband for divorce. In view of your prospective alliance with the family, I should like you to take the case.
I beg your pardon, sir, but just because of the prospective relationship, I should prefer your consulting one of the others.
The suggestion is not mine, but Mrs. Mingott's and her son's.
Her uncles ought to deal with this.
They have. The family is opposed to the Countess's idea, but she insists on a legal opinion.
Does she want to marry again?
I believe it is suggested, but she denies it.
Then...
Will you oblige me, Mr. Archer, by first looking through these papers?
When I read them, I was disturbed. In particular, there was a despicable letter from the Count to his wife. This was not a matter for strangers' eyes. Delicacy dictated that I should do as Letterblair wished, and speak with the Countess personally.
Ah, Newland. Come in close to the fire and warm yourself. Beaufort, make a space for him.
Mm-hmm. Beaufort leant against the mantelshelf, smiling down on Ellen, who sat half reclined on the sofa, smoking. She was wearing a red velvet robe bordered down the front with glossy black fur. Her head was propped on her hand, and her wide sleeve left the arm bare to the elbow. She looked like a figure in a French painting.
You'd better take all your furs and a hot water bottle to visit Skuytercliff.
Why? Is the house so cold?
No, but Mrs. van der Leyden is.
She came herself to invite me. Granny says I must certainly go.
Oh, Granny would, of course. And I say it's a shame you're going to miss the supper I'd planned for you next Sunday, with lots of jolly musicians.
That does tempt me. Except the other evening at Mrs. Struthers, I've not met a single artist since I've been here.
What kind of artists? I know one or two painters, very good fellows, that I could bring to see you if you'd allow me.
Painters? In New York?
That would be charming, Newland. But I was really thinking of dramatic artists and singers. My husband's house was always full of them.
You miss that?
It's such fun to meet new people. Don't you mind seeing the same faces every day?
New York is dying of dullness. But when I try to liven it up for you, you go back on me. Now come! Sunday is your last chance. Campanini leaves next week for Philadelphia, and I have a private room and a Steinway, and they'll sing all night for me.
How delicious. May I think it over and write to you tomorrow morning?
Why not now?
I have to talk business with Newland for a little while.
Uh-huh. I say, Newland, if you can persuade the Countess to stop in town, you're included in the supper.
You know painters, then? You live in their milieu?
Oh, not exactly. I don't know that the arts have a milieu here, any of them. They're more like a very thinly settled outskirt.
But you care for such things?
Immensely. When I'm in Paris or London, I never miss an exhibition.
I used to care immensely, too. But now I want to try not to. I want to cast off my old life and become just like everybody else here.
You'll never be like everybody else.
Oh, don't say that. I want to wipe out all the past.
I know. Mr. Letterblair has told me.
You mean you can manage it for me, instead of Mr. Letterblair? Oh, that would be so much easier.
I am here to give a legal opinion.
I want to be free.
I understand that.
Then you'll help me.
First, perhaps I ought to know a little more.
Oh, you know about my husband, my life with him.
Yes.
What more is there? In this country, are such things tolerated? I'm a Protestant. Our church doesn't forbid divorce in such cases.
No. But of course you know that if your husband chooses to fight the case, as he threatens to,
yes,
he can say things that might be damaging to you. Say them publicly. So they could harm you even if... I mean, no matter how unfounded they are.
What harm could such accusations do me here?
New York society is a very small world compared with one you've lived in. Our legislation favors divorce. Our social customs don't.
Never?
Well, not if the woman, however injured, however irreproachable, has exposed herself by any unconventional actions to offensive insinuations.
Yes. Well, that's what my family tell me.
It's not unnatural.
Our family, for you'll be my cousin soon.
I hope so.
And you take their view?
What should you gain that would compensate for the possibility of a lot of beastly rumors?
But my freedom, is that nothing?
Aren't you free as air as it is? Mr. Letterblair tells me the financial question has been settled.
Oh, yes.
Well then, is it worthwhile to risk the scandal? Think of the newspapers. It's stupid and unjust, but one can't make over society.
No.
The individual in such cases is nearly always sacrificed to the collective interest. The Mingotts, the Wellens, the van der Luydens. If I didn't show you honestly how they judge such questions, it wouldn't be fair of me, would it?
No. It wouldn't be fair. Very well. I will do what you wish.
I really do want to help you.
You do help me. Good night, my cousin.
I slept badly that night and tried to set my mind at ease by sending her 24 yellow roses in the morning. I had time on my hands to brood, for May and her parents had gone away on their annual winter holiday to St. Augustine. Indeed, May wrote me on the subject of her cousin.
Ellen likes you so much. And you know, though she doesn't show it, she's still very lonely and unhappy. I think she's been used to lots of things we haven't got. Wonderful music and picture shows and celebrities. Artists and authors and all the clever people you admire. Granny can't understand her wanting anything but lots of dinners and clothes. But I can see that you're almost the only person in New York who can talk to her about what she really cares for.
A few days later, I spotted her with Mrs. Beaufort and Sillerton at the theater. The dumb parting of two lovers on stage. The man, turning back unnoticed to kiss the hem of his lover's dress, struck me so painfully that I was on the point of leaving the theater when Mrs. Beaufort waved me over to their box.
Newland, do you think he will send her a bunch of yellow roses tomorrow morning?
You mean the play?
Of course.
I was taking the image home with me.
What do you do while May is away?
I stick to my work.
I have done what you advised.
I'm glad.
Sometimes life is difficult.
I know.
I wanted to tell you that I do feel you were right, and that I'm grateful to you.
As I left the theater, I ran across my old friend, Ned Winsett, the journalist.
Newland! Who's the dark lady in Beaufort's box?
This is not for the newspaper, I hope.
No. She's a neighbor of mine. She's been awfully kind to my little boy. He fell down her area chasing his kitten. She carried him in with his knee all beautifully bandaged, and my wife was too dazzled to ask her name.
Countess Olenska, a granddaughter of old Mrs. Mingott.
Oh, How does that countess happen to live in our slum?
Because she doesn't care a hang about where she lives or about any of our little social signposts.
Been in bigger places, I suppose. Is she as lovely as she looks?
How's work? Busy?
Well, I can tailor a love story neatly around 2 fashion plates and an advertisement for temperance drinks.
Your criticism, your literary work.
No market for it. Who in New York wants challenge and intellectual debate?
We are half stifled. But that's why we need writers like you.
I have to earn my keep. Well, you're free. Why don't you make a change in the place? Hey, why don't you go into politics?
An honest man in American politics? They don't want us.
Who's they? Why don't you society fellas all get together and be they yourselves?
They are bosses and immigrants. Decent people have to fall back on sport or culture.
Culture? The last remnants of the old European tradition dying out for lack of cross-fertilization? You decent people, you're like the pictures on the walls of a deserted house. You'll never amount to anything till you roll up your sleeves and get right down in a muck. That or emigrate. God, if I could emigrate.
It was Ned Winsett's poverty that drove him to this kind of tirade. One could no more emigrate than one could roll up one's sleeves and get down into the muck of politics or money-making. A gentleman simply stayed at home and abstained. But in the morning, after I had scoured the town in vain for yellow roses and sat at my desk at Letterblair's for 2 hours performing trivial tasks and reading the newspaper, the margin of my life which contained those things I cared for, books, art, travel, seemed not only narrow but also dangerously threatened by my impending marriage. I sent a note to Madame Olenska asking if I might call, but her reply did not come for 3 days.
I ran away the day after I saw you at the play, and the kind van der Luydens have taken me in. I wanted to be quiet and think things over. You were right in telling me how kind they were. I feel myself so safe here at Skytercliff. I wish that you were with us. Yours sincerely, Ellen.
Is Countess Olenska in?
Mr. van der Luyden is at home, sir, but I believe he's finishing his nap, and Mrs. van der Luyden and the Countess have driven to afternoon service in the village.
I'll stable my horse and walk to meet the ladies. Thank you. Instinct took me along the footpath towards the village, and I was soon rewarded by the sight of a slight figure in a red cloak, hurrying towards me.
Newland, you've come.
Ellen Olenska. So where's Mrs. van der Luyden?
She has driven over to see her old aunts at Rhinebeck. I wanted to walk. I needed to breathe.
I came to see what you were running away from.
Shall we walk on? Or what does it matter now you're here to protect me?
Ellen, what is it? You must tell me.
Let's run a race first. My feet are freezing to the ground.
Oh, what's beyond this gate?
The old patroon's house from before they built Skytercliff. They use it for a summer house.
Well, shall we look?
I knew you'd come.
That shows you wanted me to.
May I ask you to take care of me?
I didn't need any asking.
You mean I'm so evidently helpless? What a poor thing you must all think me. But women here seem never to feel the need any more than the blessed in heaven.
Ellen, why won't you tell me what's happened?
Does anything ever happen in heaven? I will tell you, but where? One can't be alone for a minute in that great seminary of a house with all the doors wide open and always a servant bringing tea or a log for the fire or the newspaper. I always feel as if I were on the stage before a dreadfully polite audience that never applauds.
Look, the patroon's house is open.
It was this morning. I wanted to see it, and Mr. van der Luyden had the fire lit so we might stop there on the way back from morning service. It's still unlocked. What luck. Come in and we can have a quiet talk.
Yes. You're laughing now, but when you wrote me, you were unhappy.
Yes, but I can't feel unhappy when you're here.
Oh, I shan't be here long.
No, I know. But I'm improvident. I live in the moment when I'm happy.
Her words stole through me like a temptation. What if she had been running from me? I made myself move away from her, to stare out of the window, so she should not see the hope in my face.
We shan't be missed at the house for another hour.
Ellen, if you really wanted me to come, tell me what it is you're running from. I imagined her, almost heard her, stealing up behind me, to throw her light arms about my neck. My soul and my body were throbbing with the miracle to come. When my eyes mechanically received the image of a heavily coated man with his fur collar turned up, hurrying along the path to the house.
Ah, so that was it.
No, I didn't know.
Hello, Beaufort. Come in. Come in. Madame Olenska is expecting you.
Ellen, there you are at last. Now you have led me the devil of a dance. Why couldn't you tell a fellow where you were going?
I am at liberty, surely, to visit friends when I please.
Aye, but while you are gadding about, I have found you the perfect little house, which must be spoken for instantly, or it'll be snapped up.
I am sorry for your trouble.
If only this new dodge of talking along a wire had been a bit nearer perfection, I might have told you this from town and been toasting my toes before the club fire, instead of tramping after you through the snow.
That week, my books from London arrived. There was a new collection of Alphonse Daudet's brilliant tales, and a novel called Middlemarch, which had attracted interesting reviews. But Ellen Olenska's face stared up at me from every page. I heard nothing from her, and our hour together at Skytcliff began to seem like a dream.
Can you pass the coffee, please, Janie?
Mercy, how pale you look, Newland.
I've noticed that lately you've been coughing. I do hope you're not letting yourself be overworked.
I'm fine, Mother. Just not sleeping terribly well. Maybe I need a change of scene.
I think he's pining for May.
That evening I received a note.
Come late tomorrow. I must explain to you. Ellen.
In the course of yet another sleepless night, I considered a variety of ways of answering her. That on which I decided, in the morning, was to board a boat that was leaving for St. Augustine.
Newland, has anything happened?
Yes, May. I found I had to see you.
Oh, how lovely. Oh, Mother and Father don't breakfast till ever so late. Let's walk out to the orange grove.
Wait. Let me kiss you. Why? What is it?
I hope nobody sees.
Tell me what you've been up to.
I've just been rowing. It's so lovely on the river in the morning. Then there's swimming, sailing, riding. The Selfridge Marys came down for 3 weeks because Kate had bronchitis, and we were planning to lay out a lawn tennis court on the sands, but no one but Kate and I had rackets.
Later that afternoon, May accompanied her father on a drive, and Mrs. Welland raised the topic of Countess Olenska.
I'm afraid Ellen's ideas are not at all like ours. She was so young when Medora took her back to Europe.
But European society is not given to divorce. Countess Olenska thought she would be conforming to American ideas in asking for her freedom.
That is just like the extraordinary things that foreigners invent about us. They think we dine at 2:00 and countenance divorce. But we do appreciate your persuading Ellen to give up the idea. Her grandmother and her Uncle Lovell could do nothing with her. Her changing her mind was entirely due to your influence. Oh, poor Ellen. She always was a wayward child. I wonder what her fate will be.
What we've all contrived to make it, is what I felt like answering. If you'd rather she should be Beaufort's mistress than some decent fellow's wife, you've gone the right way about it. Mrs. Welland's armor against any unpalatable truth was her invincible innocence. I wondered if May would grow to resemble her. I didn't want her to have that kind of innocence. The innocence that seals the mind against imagination and the heart against experience.
But of course, Newland, you felt that too. We all knew you were thinking of May.
I'm always thinking of May.
If we could bring our wedding forward, we might travel to Granada. We could see the Easter ceremonies in Seville.
Easter in Seville? But it will be Lent next week.
Why shouldn't we be married in Lent?
Newland!
Well, soon after Easter, so we could sail at the end of April. I know I could arrange it at the office.
How can we?
Why should we dream away another year, May? Don't you understand how I want you for my wife?
I'm not sure if I do understand. Is it because you're not certain of continuing to care for me?
My God.
Is there someone else?
Between you and me?
Let us talk frankly, Newland. I've felt a difference in you since our engagement has been announced.
If I'd made a mistake, is it likely I should be imploring you to hasten our marriage?
Yes. You might want, once for all, to settle the question.
Well?
I knew there was someone else you were interested in before me. Everyone was talking about it 2 years ago at Newport. And once I saw you sitting together on the veranda at a dance. And when she came back into the house, her face was sad, and I felt sorry for her.
My dear child, was that it? If you only knew the truth.
Then there is a truth I don't know?
I meant the truth about the old story you speak of.
If you feel yourself in any way pledged, even if it means her getting a divorce, don't give her up because of me.
May, that friendship was over long ago. But I love your generosity because I agree that each case must be judged individually, irrespective of stupid conventions.
People must be true to their feelings.
Yes, but since you understand so well, can't you understand the uselessness of our submitting to foolish conventions? If there's no one between us, isn't that an argument for marrying quickly, rather than for more delay?
Oh, Newland.
So, Newland, you kicked over the traces, did you? And was little May glad to see you down in Florida?
I hope she was, Mrs. Mingott. But after all, she wouldn't agree to what I'd gone down to ask for.
Wouldn't she, indeed? And what was that?
I wanted her to promise that we should be married in April. What's the use of wasting another year?
Ask Mama, I suppose. The usual story. Ah, these Mingotts, all alike, born in a rut and you can't root 'em out of it. When I built this house, you'd have thought I was moving to California. Nobody ever had built above 40th Street. No, not one of them wants to be different. They're as scared of it as the smallpox. Ah, my dear Newland, there's not one of my kin that takes after me but my little Ellen. Now, why in the world didn't you marry my little Ellen?
Well, for one thing, she wasn't there to be married.
Oh, no, to be sure, more's the pity. And now it's too late.
Can't I persuade you to use your influence with the Wellens, Mrs. Mingott? I wasn't made for long engagements.
No, I can see that. You've got a quick eye. When you were a little boy, I've no doubt you liked to be helped first. Here's my Ellen now.
Granny.
I was just saying to him, my dear, why didn't you marry my little Ellen?
And what was his answer?
Oh, my darling, I leave you to find that out. He's been down to Florida to see his sweetheart.
Yes, I know. I went to see your mother, Newland, to ask where you'd gone. I sent a note that you never answered, and I was afraid you were ill.
I left unexpectedly, in a hurry. I was going to write to you from St. Augustine.
And, of course, once you were there, you never thought of me again.
Look at him, in such haste to get married that he rushed down to implore the silly girl on his knees. That's the way handsome Bob Spicer carried off my poor mother and then got tired of her before I was weaned. But there, you're not a Spicer, young man, luckily for you and for May. It's only my poor Ellen that has kept any of their wicked blood. The rest of them are all model Mingotts.
Surely, Granny, we can persuade them between us to do as he wishes.
I must go. Goodbye, Mrs. Mingott. Countess?
I'll walk you to the door.
When can I see you again?
Whenever you like.
Tomorrow evening?
Yes, but early. I'm going out.
Ah, evening, Newland.
Ned, I didn't know you were here.
Dear Mr. Archer, I am the Marchioness Medora Manson, Ellen's aunt.
I am delighted.
My Ellen has taken me in. I'm on my way to see my great friend, Dr. Carver. You don't know Dr. Agathon Carver, founder of the Valley of Love community?
I'm afraid I'm not...
Oh, New York, New York. How little the life of the spirit has reached it. But I see you do know Mr. Winsett.
Oh, yes, I reached him some time ago, but not by that route.
How do you know, Mr. Winsett? The spirit bloweth where it listeth. Oh, but do sit down, Mr. Archer. We've been having a delightful little dinner together, and my child has gone up to dress.
I'm afraid I must be off. Please tell Madame Olenska that we shall all feel lost when she abandons our street. This house has been an oasis.
Aha, but she won't abandon you. Poetry and art are the breath of life to her. It is poetry you write, Mr. Winsett.
Well, no, but I sometimes read it. Goodbye.
A caustic spirit, un peu sauvage. Now, before Ellen comes, I'm so glad of this quiet moment with you.
Likewise, I'm delighted to...
I know everything, Mr. Archer. My child has told me all you have done for her. Your wise advice, your courageous firmness.
Madame Olenska exaggerates. I simply gave her a legal opinion as she asked me to.
Ah, but in doing it, you were the unconscious instrument of Providence. Little did you know that at that very moment I was being appealed to from the other side of the Atlantic. By the Count himself, my poor, mad, foolish Olenski, who asks only to take her back on her own terms.
Good God.
He casts himself at her feet. I have his letter here.
Has she seen it?
Time. I must have time. I know my Ellen. Haughty, intractable. Shall I say just a shade unforgiving?
To forgive is one thing, but to go back to that hell?
Ah, yes, so she describes it. My sensitive child. But on the material side, Mr. Archer, if one may stoop to consider such things, do you know what she is giving up?
She knows nothing yet of this letter?
Nothing yet. The truth is, Mr. Archer, I have been waiting to see you. From the moment I heard of your influence over her, I hoped it might be possible to count on your support.
To make her go back? I would rather see her dead.
Do you prefer to accept that man's flowers, Mr. Archer? To forget that she is a married woman?
What are you two plotting together, Aunt Medora?
We were saying, my dear, that here's a beautiful bouquet to surprise you with.
Oh, who is ridiculous enough to send me a bouquet?
Oh.
I am not going to a ball. I am not a girl engaged to be married. Some people are ridiculous. Nastasia, vieni qua. Here, throw this in the dustbin.
Ma signora.
Oh, va bene. No, it is not the fault of the poor flowers. Carry them down to Mr. Winsett's, who dined here. His wife is ill. They may give her pleasure. Here, put my cloak over you and fly. I want the thing out of the house immediately.
Mr. Archer has waited patiently while you were dressing, darling.
Yes, I gave you time enough. My hair wouldn't go. But that reminds me, you'll be late at the Blenkers. Mr. Archer, will you put my aunt in the carriage?
Yes.
Mind the carriage is to be back for me at 10. Well, what do you think of me in a temper?
It makes me understand what your aunt has been saying about you.
Oh, Medora is incorrigibly romantic.
Is your aunt's romanticism always consistent with accuracy?
What has she been telling you?
Well, she says the Count Olenski has asked her to persuade you to go back to him.
Oh, she's been hinting about a letter. Medora's hints.
Is it at your husband's request that she's arrived here suddenly?
She told me she had a spiritual summons from Dr. Carver. I'm afraid she's going to marry him. Poor Medora, there's always someone she wants to marry.
But you do believe she has a letter from your husband?
After all, it was to be expected.
Your aunt believes you'll go back.
Many cruel things have been believed of me.
Ellen, I'm sorry.
You're horribly nervous. The Wellens are unreasonable about your marriage. I thought May too intelligent to be the slave of such absurd conventionality.
She is too intelligent.
Well, then I don't understand.
She thinks I want to marry her at once to get away from someone that I care for more.
But if she thinks that, why isn't she in a hurry too?
She insists all the more on a long engagement to give me time to...
Time to give her up for the other woman?
If I want to.
That is noble.
Yes, but it's ridiculous.
Ridiculous? Because you don't care for anyone else.
Because I don't mean to marry anyone else.
Ah. This other woman. Does she love you?
Oh, there's no other woman. I mean, the person that May was thinking of was never...
Then why are you in such haste?
There's your carriage.
Yes, I suppose I must be going.
You're going to Mrs. Struthers?
Yes. I must go where I'm invited. I should be too lonely.
May guessed the truth. There is another woman, but not the one she thinks.
Don't play the lover with me. Too many men have done that.
I've never played at anything with you. But you are the woman that I would have married if it had been possible for either of us.
You say that when it's you who made it impossible?
I've made it impossible.
You! Isn't it you who made me give up divorcing because you showed me how selfish it was? How one must sacrifice oneself to spare one's family the scandal. And because my family was going to be your family, I did what you told me. I've made no secret of having done it for you.
Good God, I thought...
You thought?
Well, there are things in that letter.
My husband's letter?
Yes.
I had nothing to fear from that letter. All I feared was to bring notoriety on the family, on you and May.
Good God. Ellen, what madness. Why are you crying? Nothing's done that can't be undone. I'm still free, and you're going to be.
Oh, my poor Newland. I suppose this had to be, but it doesn't in the least alter things.
It alters the whole of life for me.
No, it can't. You're engaged to May Welland, and I'm married.
Nonsense. We've no right to lie to other people or to ourselves. Do you see me marrying May after this?
You say that because it's the easiest thing to say at this moment. Not because it's true. In reality, it's too late to do anything but what we've both decided on.
I don't understand you.
You haven't yet guessed how you've changed things for me. From the first. Long before I knew all you'd done.
All I'd done?
Yes. I was perfectly unconscious at first that people here thought I was a dreadful sort of person. They even refused to meet me at a dinner. I found that out afterwards. And how you'd insisted on announcing your engagement at the Beaufort Ball, so I might have two families to stand by me instead of one. From the very beginning, I felt there was no one as kind as you. No one who gave me reasons that I understood for doing what at first seemed so hard. The good people didn't convince me. I felt they'd never been tempted. But you understood. You had felt the world outside tugging at one with all its golden hands, and yet you hated happiness bought by disloyalty and indifference. I'd never known such goodness before.
Ellen, I'm not worthy to kiss the hem of your dress.
Don't let us undo what you've done. I can't go back now to that other way of thinking. I can't love you unless I give you up.
And Beaufort? Is he to replace me? He's waiting for you now, Mrs. Struthers. Why don't you go to him?
I shall not go out this evening. Tell the carriage to go and fetch the Signora Marchesa.
Si, signora.
Why this sacrifice?
Since you tell me that you're lonely, I've no right to keep you from your friends.
I shan't be lonely now. I was lonely, I was afraid. But you have chased away the emptiness. Now when I turn back into myself, I'm like a child going at night into a room where there's always a light.
I don't understand you.
Yet you understand May.
May is ready to give me up.
3 days after you've entreated her on your knees to hasten your marriage.
She refused. That gives me the right.
Oh, you've taught me what an ugly word that is.
If we do this now, it will be worse afterwards. Worse for everyone.
No. No. No.
Telegram, Senora.
It's from May. Darling Ellen, Granny's telegram successful. Papa and Mama agree marriage after Easter. I'm telegraphing Newland. I'm too happy for words and love you dearly. Your grateful May. There you are. You're to be married in a month.
It was judged the most brilliant wedding of the season. May and I were married in Grace Church by the Bishop of New York, with the full complement of 8 pink bridesmaids and 8 black-suited ushers. The church was perfumed with the scent of lilies, mixed with camphor from all the old aunt's furs. The bride was radiant, and my mother wept. Ellen Olenska was absent, and I stumbled through the whole thing like a sleepwalker, dimly aware that somewhere else, in the real world, real people were living and real things happening to them. Well, May, I think it all went smoothly.
Oh, Newland, nothing can go wrong now as long as we two are together.
Of course, I thought I'd lost the ring. No wedding would be complete if the poor devil of a bridegroom didn't go through that.
I was surprised that Aunt Medora came after all. Ellen wrote that they were neither of them well enough to make the journey.
Yes. I had a vision, an hallucination of Ellen's laughing face, turning to me in the doorway of the patroon's house at Skytercliff.
It's still unlocked. What luck. Come in and we can have a quiet talk.
I do wish it had been Ellen who'd recovered. Did you see the exquisite old lace she sent me?
Yes. Sorry, it was beautiful.
I do wish Mother had agreed to us showing the presents. It's a shame to have such lovely things and not let everyone admire them.
Your mother likes to do things the old way.
Well, she thinks it vulgar, but I think it's disrespectful to those who've given beautiful gifts. It hardly shows gratitude, does it, to hide them away?
May, this is a trifling matter. You must be tired. It will be good to have some tea when we arrive at Rhinebeck. I'm sure the aunts will have left everything beautifully ready before they went to town.
Oh, that is the best thing. I love it that we're going to a country house instead of honeymooning in a hotel. It's terribly English, isn't it, Newland? And we'll have the whole place to ourselves.
Ah, how kind of the van der Leydens. They've sent their carriage over from Skytercliff to take us.
I'm extremely sorry, sir, that a little accident has occurred in Rhinebeck, a leak in the water tank. Mr. van der Leyden heard of it this morning and sent a housemaid up by the early train to get the patroon's house ready.
The patroon's house?
The original house at Skytercliff, madam. It'll be quite comfortable, I think you'll find. Now, the van der Leydens have sent their cook over. You'll be perfectly private. It'll be exactly the same, sir. I do assure you.
The same as Rhinebeck. The patroon's house. But it will be 1,000 times better, won't it, Newland? It's too dear and kind of Mr. Van der Luyden to have thought of it.
I'll put your bags in the carriage, sir.
Only fancy. I've never seen inside the patroon's house. Have you? The Van der Luydens show it to so few people. Oh, but they opened it for Ellen, and she told me what a darling little place it was. She says it's the only house she's seen in America that she could imagine being perfectly happy in.
I can't feel unhappy when you're here. I'm improvident. I live in the moment when I'm happy.
I can imagine her being happy in it.
So you have seen it?
Happy! Happy! That's what we're going to be, isn't it?
Oh, it's our luck beginning. The wonderful luck we're always going to have together.
Much was accomplished in the first 6 months of our married life. We traveled to Europe, where May made the choice of our destinations. We spent a month in Paris for the dressmakers, then went mountaineering in Interlaken, and to the Normandy coast for swimming. When we returned to New York, I filled my hours at Letter Blair's office and in arranging my new library. In August, we went to Newport with May's parents to engage in the busy summer social calendar. One of the highlights was the annual archery contest held at Beaufort's summer place.
Now, Newland, don't pace about alone up here. Come down and join us in the marquee.
I'm fine, thank you, Augusta.
I hope you're not still thinking of that uninhabited island you wanted to carry May off to. Mount Desert, was it?
The scenery there is enchanting.
Well, it would have hardly been worthwhile for May to wear herself out trying on summer clothes in Paris if she were to spend the summer camping out in the wilderness.
Very true. They show to great advantage here.
Oh, they do indeed. And you know, I think she'll win this afternoon.
Newland, you just arrived.
Afternoon, Beaufort.
Mrs. Welland?
If you'll excuse me, I must go and wish May luck.
They make a fine picture. Your gardens and the ladies' summer dresses.
Not bad, not bad. Now, what did you see in Europe? Any new exhibitions?
May is more interested in sport than galleries.
Yes. You don't come across many women as cultured as our friend Countess Olenska, do you?
Have you seen her?
No, not for weeks. She's become damnably unsociable, hiding herself away with her dotty Aunt Medora. She won't accept anyone's invitation to stay in Newport. I sent my trotters over for them this morning.
Is she here?
Medora's here. The trotters did their business in 40 minutes. Not bad, if I say so myself. But apparently the Countess insisted on being dropped off at old Catherine Mingott's summer house. Now, I am going down to start the match. You coming?
Gad, not one of the lot holds the bow as May does.
Yes, Lawrence, but that's the only kind of target she'll ever hit.
Well, your heart's already spoken for. Newland, your wife's gonna carry off first prize.
And where's Beaufort going?
Not very far, in my opinion. You've heard?
About the cruise he took with Miss Annie Ring?
They say he spent $500,000 on the yacht. There are rumbles on Wall Street.
About his bank?
Miss Ring will bleed him dry. She's that type.
Well, he doesn't look well. He seems rather bloated.
He's on his way down, and poor Kino with him.
I didn't like the way he spoke about May.
No, he's a vulgar specimen at the end of the day.
Oh, Newland.
Well done, Mrs. Archer.
Congratulations, darling.
Well, can we go and have tea with Granny? I'd like to tell her myself that I've won the prize. There's lots of time before dinner.
So, Newland, Beaufort presents a brooch to the winner, does he?
He does.
It's an arrow, see?
I can see well enough that it's tipped with a diamond, my girl. There's no denying Beaufort does things handsomely. Quite an heirloom, in fact. You must leave it to your eldest girl.
Granny!
Well, what have I said to make you shake out the red flag? Ain't there going to be any daughters? Only boys, Good gracious, look at her blushing again all over her blushes. Mercy me, it's a wonder the world gets populated at all.
Granny, change the subject, if you please.
Oh, well, then, tell me all about the archery, for I shall never get a straight word out of that silly Medora.
Is Medora coming here?
Yes, to pick up Ellen. You don't know Ellen had come to spend the day with me. Such falderall her not staying for the summer. But I gave up arguing with young people about 50 years ago. Ellen! Ellen!
Excuse me, ma'am, but I saw Miss Ellen going down the path to the shore.
Newland, run down and fetch her like a good grandson. Your pretty wife will describe the party to me.
I walked down the bank, past the weeping willows, following the path to the shore like a sleepwalker. The pier ended in a pagoda, and in the pagoda stood a lady, leaning against the rail, looking out to sea. I stopped. She didn't move. I could feel my life looming behind me in the house. May, glowing with secret hopes, her pony carriage circling around and around the oval at the door. The Wellens, already fretting over whether we might be late for dinner. Boats furrowed their way across the bay. The figure at the end of the pier seemed entranced by them. The sunset was splintering into 1,000 fires, and the radiance caught the sail of a catboat as she beat out through the channel. If she doesn't turn before that sail crosses the Lime Rock light, I'll go back. The boat was gliding out on the receding tide. I waited till it slid past the Lime Rock, but still she didn't move. I turned and walked back up to the house.
I'm sorry you didn't find Ellen. I should have liked to see her again. But perhaps she wouldn't have cared. She seems so changed.
Changed?
So indifferent to her friends. I mean, giving up New York and her house, and spending her time with such strange people. She says she does it to keep Aunt Medora out of mischief, but I sometimes think we've bored her. After all, I wonder if she wouldn't be happier back with her husband.
I don't think I've ever heard you say a cruel thing before.
Cruel?
Well, watching the contortions of the damned is supposed to be the favorite sport of the angels. But I believe even they don't think people happier in hell.
It's a pity she ever married abroad, then. Mother thinks so, too.
It was more than a year since I had spoken with Ellen Olenska, and I thought I had adapted myself to married life. But I lay awake all that night, watching the moonlight slant along the carpet, thinking of her driving home across the gleaming beaches behind Beaufort's trotters. In the morning, I rode across to where she and Medora were staying. There I was told that Ellen had been suddenly called away to Boston and was lodging at the Parker house. May was already prepared for me to return to work and easily believed that I had business in Boston. The next day, I was there. It was hot and sticky in the city. I walked from the station across the common towards the Parker house. As I drew near, I saw a slight, dark-haired figure sitting listlessly on a bench, her gray sunshade shadowing her face.
Oh, Newland.
I'm here on business. Just got in. What on earth are you doing in this oven?
I? Oh, I'm here on business, too.
You do your hair differently.
Differently? No, it's only that I do it as best I can when I'm without Nastasia.
Nastasia? But she isn't with you?
No, for 2 days it was not worthwhile to bring her.
You're alone at the Parker house?
Is that unconventional? I suppose it is. I hadn't thought of it, because I've just done something so much more unconventional. I've just refused to take back a sum of money that belonged to me.
What were the conditions?
Oh, they weren't onerous, just to sit at the head of my husband's table now and then.
He wants you back at any price?
Well, a considerable price. At least the sum is considerable for me.
It was to meet him here that you came.
Meet him? Olenska? Here? At this season, he's always at Cowes or Baden.
He sent someone?
Yes.
With a letter?
No, just a message. He never writes. I don't think I've had more than one letter from him.
Why does he never write?
Why should he? What does one have a secretary for?
And you're here thinking it over?
I came out to get a breath of air. The hotel's stifling. I have to see the secretary again before I leave.
This is horrible. Why shouldn't we go out a little on the bay? Oh, there's a breeze and it will be cooler. We might take the steamboat down to Point Arley.
I don't...
On a Monday morning, there won't be anyone on the boat. Why shouldn't we? Haven't we done all we could?
Oh, you mustn't say things like that to me.
I'll say anything you like or nothing. Oh, give me the day. I want to get you away from that man. At what time is he coming?
At 11.
I swear, I only want to hear about you. To know what you've been doing. Oh, it's 100 years since we've met. It may be another 100 before we meet again.
Why didn't you come down to the beach to fetch me the day I was at Granny's?
Because you didn't look around. Because you didn't know I was there. I swore I wouldn't unless you looked around.
But I didn't look around on purpose.
On purpose?
I knew you were there. When you drove in, I recognized May's pony. So I went down to the beach.
To get away from me as far as you could?
To get away from you as far as I could.
Well, you see, it's no use. I may as well tell you. The business I came here for was just to find you. But look here. We must start or we shall miss our boat.
Our boat? Oh, but I must go back to the hotel. I must leave a note.
As many notes as you please. You can write here. I've even got an envelope. You see? How everything's predestined? We took her note over to the Parker house and went on by cab to the wharf. As our boat left the harbor, a breeze sprang up, and the bay broke into long, oily undulations, then into ripples tipped with spray. We sat together, smiling, in the blessed silence of our release. And when we landed at the inn, I asked for a private dining room. Tell me everything that's happened.
I've decided to settle in Washington. I'm tired of New York. I'm too different. I don't care for the things society cares about. And I need to make a home for poor Medora. She's worn out the patience of all her relations.
Are you still afraid of her marrying Dr. Carver?
Oh, the Carver danger is over. Dr. Carver's a clever man. He wants a rich wife to finance his plans. Poor Medora is simply a good advertisement as a convert.
Convert to what?
To all sorts of new and crazy social schemes. But do you know they interest me more than the blind conformity to tradition? Somebody else's tradition that I see among our own friends. It seems stupid to have discovered America only to make it into a copy of another country. Do you suppose Christopher Columbus would have taken all that trouble just to go to the opera with the Van der Leydens?
Do you say these things to Beaufort?
I haven't seen him for a long time. But I used to, and he understands.
You like Beaufort because he's so unlike us. We're damnably dull. We've no character, no color, no variety. I wonder why you don't go back.
I believe it's because of you.
I did not dare to reply. It was as if her words were some rare butterfly that the least motion might drive off on startled wings.
It was you who made me understand that under the dullness there are things so fine and sensitive and delicate that even those I most cared for in my other life look cheap in comparison.
Ellen.
I want to be perfectly honest with you and with myself. For a long time I've hoped this chance would come, that I might tell you how you've helped me, what you've made of me.
And what do you make out that you've made of me?
Of you?
I'm of your making much more than you ever were of mine. I'm the man who married May Welland because Ellen Olenska told him to.
I thought you promised not to say such things today.
Oh, how like a woman. None of you will ever see a bad business through.
Is it a bad business for May? Because that's why we've done it, isn't it? By your own showing.
My own showing?
If it's not worthwhile to have given something up so that others may be saved from disillusionment and misery, then everything I came home for is just a dream.
And in that case, there's no reason why you shouldn't go back?
Oh, is there no reason?
Not if you stake your all on the success of my marriage. My marriage isn't going to be a sight to keep you here. Ellen, you gave me my first glimpse of a real life. And at the same moment, you asked me to go on with a sham one. It's beyond enduring.
Oh, don't say that when I'm enduring it.
You too. All this time, you too. Oh, Ellen, you are closer to me than my own bones.
Newland.
How on earth can I keep you?
Oh, I shan't go yet.
Sometime then. Sometime that you already foresee?
I promise you, not as long as you hold out. Not as long as we can look straight at each other like this.
What a life for you.
As long as it's a part of yours.
And mine a part of yours?
Yes.
And that's to be all? For either of us.
Don't be unhappy.
You won't go back. You won't go back to him?
I won't go back.
I returned to the stifling heat of New York, where I seemed to see everything through a golden haze. Then came something that cut right through it. A request for an interview from one Monsieur Rivière, secretary to Count Olenska.
I should like, if I may, to speak to you about the Countess Olenska.
On whose behalf?
Well, I might say hers, if it didn't sound like a liberty. On behalf of justice.
But you are Count Olenski's messenger.
My mission is over. As far as the Countess goes, it has failed.
I can't help that, Monsieur Rivière.
No, but you can help to make it equally a failure with her family.
Why the devil should you think that I would take a view contrary to the rest of her family?
Then you agree with them that the Countess should return to her husband?
Good God.
Is it possible you don't know, Monsieur Archer, that the family wish the Countess to accept her husband's latest proposal?
What do you want me to do?
I beg you not to let her go back. Oh, don't let her.
Is this the line you took with the Countess?
No. I accepted my mission in good faith. I really believed that it would be better for Madame Olenska to recover her fortune and the social consideration her husband's standing gives her.
Well, then.
I put the Count's arguments to her. I stated his offers. And in the course of these 2 talks, I changed my mind.
May I ask, what led to this change?
Seeing the change in her. If you are an American of her kind, of your kind, things that are accepted in certain other societies become unthinkable.
In the weeks after this interview, I was increasingly aware of the wall of silence that surrounded Ellen Olenska. May never mentioned her. None of the family did. She had become an embarrassment they wished to ignore. But she was enthroned in my heart, in a sanctuary to which I brought my most vital ideas and feelings. Outside that, in the scene of my actual life, I moved with a growing sense of unreality, blundering against familiar prejudices as a short-sighted man goes on bumping into the furniture of his own room. I was so absent from everyone around me that it sometimes startled me to find they imagined I was still there. The next time I heard her name was in the comfortably gloomy portals of our club.
You've heard the rumors about Beaufort.
My belief is he'll pull through yet, Lawrence.
Well, I know he was to see some of the influential investors today. It's to be hoped they can tide him over. I shouldn't like to think of poor Regina spending the rest of her life in some watering place for bankrupts.
He hasn't spent all his money on Regina.
No. Your cousin, the Countess, will suffer quite materially from his downfall, Newland.
What the devil do you mean?
It's a pity she didn't go back to her husband before Beaufort's cropper. If she goes after he fails, it will only confirm the general impression.
She won't go back now. She'll never go.
Well, no doubt you know. But the few pennies Medora Manson has left are in Beaufort's hands. And how the 2 women are to keep their heads above water unless he does, I can't imagine.
I left the club beside myself with rage and went into hiding in my library. I could hear May moving about in her bedroom. May? May! This lamp is smoking again. I should think the servants might see that it's kept properly trimmed.
I'm so sorry. It shan't happen again.
Look here. I may have to go to Washington for a few days, soon. Next week, perhaps.
On business?
On business, naturally. There's a patent case coming up before the Supreme Court, and old Letta Blair wants me to handle it.
The change will do you good. And you must be sure and go and see poor Ellen. Good night, dear.
She knew what I was doing. She believed it was I who was responsible for Ellen's refusal to go back to Olenska, against the wishes of the whole family. She was telling me she was fully aware that I was going to Washington expressly to see Ellen. And it did not in the least alter my resolve to go. But then events began to move rather quickly. On the Wednesday morning, Letterblair called me into his office to tell me the worst possible news about Beaufort. He'd let it be known that influential friends had tided him over, and in consequence depositors had made a number of heavy payments into the bank. Then it got out that the tiding over was a lie, and a run on the bank began. Its doors would close by the end of the day, and Beaufort's maneuver was generally reckoned to be despicable. An urgent note came for me while I was with Letterblair. It was from May.
Won't you please come up to town as early as you can? Granny had a slight stroke last night. In some mysterious way, she found out before anyone else this awful news about Beaufort's bank. Uncle Lovell is away, and the shock has made poor Papa so nervous that he has a temperature and can't leave his room. Mamma needs you dreadfully, and I do hope you can get away at once and go straight to Granny's.
There, Mama.
May, how is she?
Dr. Bankham is taking a hopeful view, and we've telegraphed everybody. Uncle Lovell, Aunt Medora, Ellen, and Mamma says...
You know what caused this, Newland? The most dreadful business yesterday evening.
I think I know, Augusta.
About 8 o'clock, just after my mother had finished her game of solitaire, the doorbell rang, and a lady so thickly veiled as to be unrecognizable asked to be received. You know who it was? Regina Beaufort. And she stayed about an hour. After she left, the maid says that although my mother seemed distressed, she was in complete control of herself and took her cup of tea and was put to bed. But at 3 a.m, she rang her bell, and they found her sitting up in bed with her face all crooked in one hand. Oh, my dearest, just hanging limp and useless.
Mamma, it's all right. Look how much she's recovered even since we've been here. She's talking again.
Yes. And do you know what Regina came to ask her? The most incredible effrontery. She wanted her to support Beaufort, to get the family to rally round him.
She said, but my name, Auntie, my name is Regina Dallas. I said it was Beaufort when he covered you with jewels, and it's got to stay Beaufort. Now he's covered you with shame.
All right now, Mama, hush now. You must rest. The only decent thing Regina can do is to simply disappear along with Beaufort. How can she imagine anyone could countenance a man who has ruined hundreds of innocent people?
Oh, you know what Kate Selfridge Mary told me? That emerald necklace Regina wore at the opera last Friday was sent on approval from Ball and Black's that very afternoon.
Well, they won't be getting that back in a hurry.
Here's a telegram come from Ellen, Mamma. She'll arrive from Washington to Jersey City tomorrow afternoon.
Oh, but May, who on earth can meet her? Dr. Benkham is keeping your father in bed, and you and I will be needed here. Oh, your Uncle Lovell won't be back till the evening.
Shall I fetch her? I can easily get away from the office in time, if May will send the carriage there for me.
Oh, thank heavens, Newland.
Newland, I didn't want to worry Mamma, but how can you meet Ellen tomorrow when you're going to Washington?
Oh, I'm not going.
Not going? Why? What's happened?
The case is off. Postponed.
How odd. I saw a note this morning from Mr. Letterblair to Mamma saying that he was going to Washington tomorrow for a big patent case that he has to argue before the Supreme Court.
Well, that's it. The whole office can't go.
Oh, then it's not postponed.
No, but my going is. I'm not going till later on. Luckily for the convenience of your family.
Yes, it is awfully convenient that you should be able to meet Ellen after all. You saw how much Mamma appreciated your offering to do it.
I'm delighted to do it.
Ellen! Ellen!
Newland! You're here!
This way. I have the carriage. You didn't expect me today.
Oh, no.
I meant to go to Washington to see you. I made all my arrangements. I very nearly crossed you on the train.
Oh?
Do you know I hardly recognized you?
Hardly.
I mean, how can I explain? Each time you happen to me all over again.
Oh, yes. I know.
Do I to you?
Yes.
Ellen.
What a pretty carriage. Is it May's?
Yes.
It was May who sent you to fetch me. How kind of her.
Your husband's secretary came to see me the day after we met in Boston.
Monsieur Riviere went to see you?
Yes. You didn't know?
No.
Ellen, I must ask you one thing.
Yes.
Was it? It was Riviere who helped you to get away. When you left your husband?
Yes. I owe him a great debt.
I think you're the most honest woman I ever met.
Oh, no. But probably one of the least fussy.
Now, call it what you like. You look at things as they are.
I've had to. I've had to look at the Gorgon.
Well, it hasn't blinded you. You've seen that she's just an old bogey like all the others.
She doesn't blind one, but she dries up one's tears.
If you're not blind, you must see that this can't last.
What can't?
Our being together and not together.
No. You ought not to have come today. Oh, kiss me.
Oh, Ellen.
No, please.
Look, I don't want this to dwindle into some sordid love affair any more than you do. When I see you, you're so much more than I remembered. And what I want of you is so much more than an hour or two every now and then that I can sit perfectly still beside you, like this, with that other vision in my mind, just quietly trusting it to come true.
What do you mean by trusting it to come true?
You know it will, don't you?
Your vision of you and me together? You choose your place well to put it to me.
You mean because we're in my wife's carriage? Well, shall we get out and walk?
No, I shan't get out and walk. Because my business is to get to Granny's as quickly as I can, and you'll sit beside me, and we'll not look at visions, but at realities.
I don't know what you mean by realities. The only reality to me is this.
Is it your idea, then, that I should live with you as your mistress, since I can't be your wife?
I want to get away with you to a world where words like that, categories like that, won't exist. Where we shall simply be two human beings who love each other.
Oh, my dear. Where is that country? Have you ever been there? I know so many who've tried to find it, and believe me, they've all gone out of wayside stations at places like Bologna or Pisa or Monte Carlo, and it wasn't at all different from the old world they'd left, only rather smaller and dingier and more promiscuous.
Yes, the Gorgon has dried your tears.
Well, she opened my eyes, too. She doesn't blind people. She fastens their eyelids open so that they're never again in the blessed darkness. Isn't there a Chinese torture like that? Believe me, it's a miserable little country.
Then what exactly is your plan for us?
For us? But there's no us in that sense. We're near each other only if we stay far from each other. Otherwise, we're only Newland Archer, the husband of Ellen Olenska's cousin, and Ellen Olenska, cousin of Newland Archer's wife, trying to be happy behind the backs of people who trust them.
I'm beyond that.
No, you're not. You've never been beyond. And I have. And I know what it looks like there.
Stop. Stop the carriage.
Why? This isn't Granny's?
No. I shall get out of here. You're right. I ought not to have come today.
Newland, what became of you? I was waiting at Granny's, and Ellen came alone and said she had dropped you on the way because you had to rush off on business. There's nothing wrong.
Only some letters I'd forgotten and wanted to get off before dinner.
Oh.
How's your granny?
She's improving, I think. She told me she wants to see you about something private. Of course, she's been upset all over again by this latest news about the Beauforts.
What news?
It seems they're planning to stay in New York after all. He's going into an insurance business or something.
He's a fool. They should leave town.
What's the matter?
The room's stifling. I want a little air.
Newland, do shut the window. You'll catch your death.
Catch my death? I had caught it already. I'd been dead for months. I had to escape. With Ellen. Run away, the pair of us. Run for our lives.
Newland, are you ill?
Poor May.
Poor? Why poor?
Because I shall never be able to open a window without worrying you.
I shall never worry if you're happy.
I went to see old Catherine, hoping I might gain a word in private with Ellen.
My dear Newland, am I perfectly hideous? My daughters tell me it doesn't matter at my age. As if hideousness didn't matter all the more, the harder it gets to conceal.
Mrs. Mingott, you're handsomer than ever.
But not as handsome as Ellen. Was she so awfully handsome the day you drove her up from the ferry? Was it because you told her so that she had to put you out on the way? In my youth, young men didn't desert pretty women unless they were made to.
No, she didn't make me.
Well, it's settled anyway. She's going to stay with me, whatever the rest of the family says. She hadn't been here 5 minutes before I'd have gone down on my knees to keep her.
Your sons disapprove?
Oh, they persuaded me that I must cut off her allowance till she was made to see that it was her duty to go back to Olenska. They thought they'd convinced me when that secretary man came out with the last proposals. But the minute I laid eyes on her, I said, "You sweet bird, you. Shut you up in that cage again? Never." And I've told Etta Blair she's to be given her proper allowance.
I had come to tell Ellen I was going with her. Not just to Washington, but to wherever we might spend the rest of our lives together. Italy, India, Japan. But if Ellen was going to stay with Granny, it proves she couldn't give me up. She'd agreed to stay in New York because she wanted to see me on any terms.
The family don't want her here. And they'll say it's because I've been ill, because I'm a weak old woman that she's persuaded me. I'm not well enough yet to fight them one by one, and you've got to do it for me.
Aye. I don't count. I'm too insignificant.
You're Letter Blair's partner, ain't you? You've got to get at them through Letter Blair.
You shall have my help if you need it. Is Ellen here?
Not today. She's gone out, my child. Gone in my carriage to see Regina Beaufort.
Good Lord.
That's what she's reduced me to already. The day after she got here, she put on her best bonnet and told me, as cool as a cucumber, that she was going to call on Regina Beaufort. She's the wife of a scoundrel, I told her. Well, says she, so am I. And yet all my family want me to go back to him. Then she said it was raining, and she wanted me to lend her my carriage. Now, my dear, I looked out of the window and saw it wasn't raining a drop. But I understood her, and I let her have the carriage. After all, Regina's a brave woman, and I've always liked courage above everything.
Ellen had stayed because she was willing for us to become lovers. As I walked towards the Beauforts, I began to think about the role I would be required to play with May. That same role Mrs. Rushworth had played towards her husband when she and I had had our little affair. A bantering, humoring, watchful lie. A lie in every touch and every look, a lie in every word and in every silence. I had always found Lawrence Lefferts contemptible. But then, Ellen was not like the women he pursued. Ellen and I would be answerable to no tribunal but that of our own judgment. Old Catherine's carriage was indeed standing outside Regina's house, and as I approached, Ellen came down the steps, illumined in a faint light from the hall behind her. Ellen!
Ah.
I shall see you now. We shall be together.
Newland.
No one can see us in the dark.
Granny's told you?
Yes. Tomorrow I must see you, somewhere where we can be alone.
But I shall be at Granny's.
Somewhere where we can be alone.
In New York? But there are no churches, no meeting places.
There's the art museum. In the park. At 2:30. I shall be at the door. This way. No one ever visits the antiquities.
It seems cruel that after a while nothing matters. Look at these little things that used to be necessary and important to forgotten people. Now they have to be guessed at under a magnifying glass and labeled use unknown.
Yes, but meanwhile...
Meanwhile...
Meanwhile, everything matters. That concerns you.
What is it that you wanted to tell me?
I believe you came to New York because you were afraid.
Afraid?
Of my coming to Washington.
Yes, I knew.
Well then?
Well then, this is better, isn't it?
Better?
We shall hurt others less, isn't that what you always wanted?
To have you here, in reach and yet out of reach? To meet you in this way, on the sly? It's the very reverse of what I want. I told you the other day what I wanted.
And you still think this worse?
1,000 times. It would be easy to lie to you, but the truth is I think it detestable.
Oh, so do I.
Well then, it's my turn to ask. What is it in God's name that you think better?
I promised Granny to stay with her because it seemed to me that here I should be safer.
From me?
Safer from doing irreparable harm. Don't let us be like all the others.
What others? I don't profess to be different from my kind. I'm consumed by the same wants and the same longings.
Shall I once come to you and then go home?
Ellen. Go home. What do you mean by going home?
Home to my husband.
You expect me to say yes to that?
What else is there? I can't stay here and lie to the people who've been good to me.
But that's the very reason I ask you to come away.
And destroy their lives when they've helped me to remake mine?
But look, we have lives of our own. There's no use attempting the impossible. I don't know why you're afraid to face our case and see it as it really is. Unless you think the sacrifice is not worth making.
Call it that, then. I must go.
Well, then. Come to me once. Tomorrow?
The day after.
Oh. Ellen. Ellen, dear.
I should be late. Goodbye. No. Don't come any further than this.
When I got home, May was out, and I sat and stared a long time into the redness of the fire.
Oh, I'm dreadfully late. You weren't worried, were you?
May, is it late?
After 7. I went to see Granny, and just as I was going away, Ellen came in from a walk, so I stayed and had a long talk with her. It was ages since we'd had a real talk.
Good.
She was just like the old Ellen. I'm afraid I haven't been fair to her lately. I've sometimes thought...
Yes, you've thought?
Well, perhaps I haven't judged her fairly. She takes up such odd people.
She's led a different sort of life.
Do you understand why the family have sometimes been annoyed? We all did what we could for her at first, but she never seemed to understand. And now this idea of going to see Regina Beaufort, of going there in Granny's carriage...
She sees the similarity...
I'm afraid she's quite alienated the van der Leydens.
Indeed. It's time to dress. We're dining out, aren't we?
Newland, you haven't kissed me today.
The next evening we attended the opera, Faust. I arrived late and looked across to the Mingott's box, where May sat beside her mother. She was wearing her wedding dress, which, as fashion dictated, came out on special occasions. 2 years previously, I had stood in the same spot and watched Ellen Olenska make her entrance into our lives. May looked pale. I found myself thinking of her innocence, her generosity, the way she had once begged me to give her up if my heart lay elsewhere. Well, suddenly I couldn't bear it any longer. I needed to tell her the truth and ask her to give me my freedom. May, I've got a beastly headache. Can we go home?
Now? Before the interval?
Yes. Let's just slip away quietly.
so sorry you don't feel well, Newland. I'm afraid they've been overworking you at the office again.
No, it's not
Oh,
that.
be careful.
Oh, sorry, did I tread... Are you all right?
That poor dress, it's torn.
Here.
It's all stained with mud. Oh, never mind.
You're pale. Can I get you some brandy?
Oh, no, not brandy. But hadn't you better go to bed at once?
No, my head's not as bad as that. And there's something I want to say. Something important that I must tell you at once.
Yes, dear?
May, there is something I've got to tell you. About myself.
What is it?
Countess Olenska...
Oh, why should we talk about Ellen tonight?
Because I ought to have spoken before.
What does it matter now it's all over?
What do you mean?
Well, since she's going back to Europe so soon. Since Granny approves and understands and has arranged to make her independent of her husband.
It's impossible.
Didn't you know? It was settled this morning.
How do you know?
I told you I saw Ellen yesterday at Granny's.
But it wasn't then that she told you.
No, I had a note from her this afternoon. It's here, on the mantelpiece. I thought you knew.
May, dear, I have at last made Granny understand that my visit to her could be no more than a visit. And she has been as kind and generous as ever. She sees now that if I return to Europe, I must live by myself. Or rather with poor Aunt Medora, who is coming with me. I am hurrying back to Washington to pack up, and we sail next week. You must be very good to Granny when I'm gone, as good as you've always been to me. And if any of my friends wish to urge me to change my mind, please tell them it would be utterly useless. Your cousin, Ellen.
Why did she write this?
I suppose because we talked things over yesterday.
What things?
I told her I was afraid I hadn't been fair to her. Hadn't always understood how hard it must have been for her here, alone among so many people who felt the right to criticize. I knew you'd been the one friend she could always count on, and I wanted her to know that you and I are the same in all our feelings.
The same.
I think she understood. My head aches too. Good night, dear.
I watched her go, her torn and muddy wedding dress dragging after her across the room. I didn't hear from Ellen, and I didn't write. She was struggling against her fate. She was still trying to run away from me. But she wasn't returning to her husband, and therefore there was no reason why I shouldn't follow her to Europe. In the deadly silent game between us, the trumps were still in my hands. And so I waited.
Newland, you know Ellen's deserted me. Oh, don't ask me why. She gave so many reasons that I've forgotten them all. My private belief is that she couldn't face the boredom. But I don't know that I altogether blame her. Life with Olenska must have been a good deal more exciting than it is in Fifth Avenue.
But she's not going back.
No, she has no idea of going back to him. She held out as firmly as ever against that. So she's to settle in Paris with that fool Medora.
Why Paris? And why so soon?
Paris is Paris, and you can keep a carriage there on next to nothing. But she was as gay as a bird, and I shall miss her.
Newland, I want to give a farewell dinner for Ellen, for the night before she sails.
A dinner? Why?
But you like Ellen. I thought you'd be pleased.
It's awfully nice you're putting it that way. But I really don't
I
see...
mean to do it, Newland. Here are the invitations all written. Mother helped me. She agrees that we ought to.
Oh, all right.
She arrived a little late. She was excessively pale, and her pallor made her hair seem denser and heavier than ever. She had amber beads about her neck, and they were trying to her complexion. Her face was lusterless and almost ugly. and I had never loved it as I did at that minute.
Yes, we're sailing tomorrow on the Russia.
Newland, dinner's been announced. Won't you please take Ellen in?
Did you find the journey tiring?
Not at all. I have seldom traveled with fewer discomforts, except, the dreadful heat on the train.
You won't suffer from that in France. I never was more nearly frozen than once in April in a train between Calais and Paris.
Well, after all, one can always carry an extra rug. I suppose every form of travel has its hardships.
Yes. And they are all of no account compared with the blessedness of getting away.
I don't think...
I mean to do a lot of traveling myself before long. Oh, I say, Lawrence, what do you say to a trip around the world? Next month, I mean. Now, I'm game if you are.
Better things to do, old man. I've got to practice for the international polo match.
I babbled nonsense. I've no idea. She was beside me, and we were prisoners in the center of an armed camp. The Mingotts, the Wellens, the Lefferts, the van der Luydens, the lot of them had been spying on us. I realized they believed us to be lovers. And now the whole tribe had rallied to see her off in the old New York way. The way of people who place decency above courage and believe that nothing is more ill-bred than scenes. They were sealing me into my marriage with May, like closing the doors of the family vault.
The worst part of the Beauforts staying in New York is that one runs the risk of bumping into them. And how on earth is one supposed to behave then?
It's not very nice to cut people, Mama.
I believe your mother's right, my dear May. After all, it's not very nice to swindle people.
No. If society chooses to open its doors to men of obscure origin and tainted wealth, and permits them to marry women like Regina, we face total collapse.
That's a little strong, Lawrence.
Not at all. If things go on at this pace, we shall see our children fighting for invitations to swindlers' houses.
And so the evening swept on, running and running like a senseless river that didn't know how to stop. Until at last I saw Ellen rising to say goodbye. Is your carriage here?
The van der Luydens are kindly giving me a lift home. Goodbye, Newland.
Goodbye. But I shall see you soon, in Paris.
If you and dear May could come, it would be delightful.
Goodbye, my dear. Safe
It's a shame you have to go so soon, Ella.
Good night, dear Ellen.
Good night, yes. Safe journey.
I say, Newland, old chap.
Lawrence?
Do you mind just letting it be understood that I'm dining with you at the club tomorrow night? If my wife should ask. Thanks so much, you old brick.
It did go off well, didn't it?
What's that?
May I come in and talk it over?
Of course, if you like. But you must be awfully tired.
Oh, no. I'm not tired. I should like to sit with you a little.
Very well. Since you're not tired and want to talk, there's something I must tell you. I tried the other night.
Yes, dear? Something about yourself?
About myself. You say you're not tired. Well, I am. Horribly tired.
Oh, I've seen it coming on, Newland. You've been so wickedly overworked.
Perhaps it's that. Anyway, I want to make a break.
A break? To give up the law?
To go away, at any rate, at once. On a long trip ever so far off. Away from everything.
Ever so far? Where, for instance?
Oh, I don't know. India or Japan?
As far as that? Oh, but I'm afraid you can't, dear. Not unless you'll take me with you. That is, if the doctors will let me go. But I'm afraid they won't. You see, I've been sure since this morning of something I've been so longing and hoping for.
You mean?
A baby. You didn't guess?
Yes, No. That is, of course, I hoped. Have you told anyone else?
Only Mama and your mother. That is, and Ellen. You know, I told you we'd had a long talk one afternoon, and how dear she was to me. Did you mind my telling her first, Newland?
Mind? Why should I? But you talked to her a fortnight ago, didn't you? I thought you said you weren't sure till today.
But I told her I was. And you see, I was right.
I lived the life laid out for me. May's pregnancy was the first of 3. I was a faithful husband, a good citizen, a loving father. My days were filled decently. It was all a man could ask. Something I knew I had missed. The flower of life. But who can ever grasp it? Ellen became the composite vision of all I had missed, and I guarded her in the sanctuary of my heart. 26 years later, and 2 years after May's death, our oldest son, Dallas, persuaded me to accompany him to Paris. He had some business to conduct with his architecture firm, and after he was done, we wandered, crossing the Place des Invalides and heading down one of the neighboring streets to a quiet, sunlit square. He told me we were outside the apartment of Countess Olenska. He had her address from Regina and had arranged for us to see her. I sat on the bench to compose myself while he rattled on. Then he suddenly asked me, wasn't Ellen Olenska the woman I would have chucked everything for, only I didn't? He said his mother, the day before her death, had told him that he and his brother and sister would always be safe with me. Because when May had asked me, I had given up the thing I most wanted. Your mother never asked me. I told him to go up ahead of me. I watched him pass out of sight under the vaulted doorway and imagined him being carried up in a lift to the 5th floor. He would be ushered into her exotic, perfumed drawing room, and she would look up quickly with her pale face and dark hair and hold out her thin hand to him. More real to me than if I went up. I sat, rooted to my seat, as dusk fell around me, clinging on to that last shadow of reality.
In The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton, Ryan McCluskey was Newland Archer, Susan Lynch played Ellen Olenska, Kelly Bright was May Welland, and Eleanor Bronn was Catherine Mingott. Lorelei King was Augusta Welland, Barbara Barnes was Adeline Archer, and Sarah Goldberg was Janie Archer. Age of Innocence was written by Edith Wharton, dramatised by Jane Rogers, and directed by Nadia Molinari.